Okay, while people come in, we're just going to start. We only have an hour with the mayor, so let's get this ball rolling. Thank you all so much for coming out today. It's a beautiful day. We don't see it very often in March, so thank you. My name is Jo Jones, and I am just a neighbor in Montavilla, as well as you are, I'm sure. Before we get started, I just want to say we won't tolerate any outbursts. We're here to visit and talk and just have a conversation around the topics that mean something to us, right? Let's use our voices, and you will be escorted out if you can't control yourself. When you came in, you received some items that I will just briefly share with you. The mayor is willing to take some questions, so if you have a question occur to you, please fill it out and we'll collect them. These are your representatives and the times that they will be willing to listen to your concerns about the city. Take advantage of that. They're your reps and they don't know what to do unless you tell them. Also on here is a little QR code. If you'd like to volunteer for other events or things that impact our city and updates on this topic, please fill that out. And then you received a survey. We would love to hear your thoughts on this. We're not all going to agree, but I think we will agree what is safe and livable and compassionate for our neighbors. So please fill that out. The church has so graciously, and the school, to allow us to use the space, and they asked that they could share a statement with us. So Bill?
Good afternoon and welcome to Eastside Church of Christ. I'm Bill Roberts, one of the elders here at Eastside. And I want to take just a few seconds to espouse one of our core values. We affirm the Apostle Paul when he stated, "Our fight is not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." We take that to mean that our enemies are not the people in this room, but rather, as Paul states, the forces of evil. Therefore, when faced with disagreements, we believe in civil discourse with ideas exchanged clearly but without injury. And to quote Paul again, let all that you do be done in love. Thank you for participating in this forum.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I'd like to introduce you to a person that's kind of been behind this, Angela Todd. She is also a neighbor and a business owner. She runs PDX Real, and her desire is to engage the community and educate us on how we can be more involved in our government, which is really important at this stage of our city and our county. So I would like to invite Angela to come up.
I want to start off script. I want to thank every one of you for being here. I am so delighted with 5 women. Kat, who's going to speak to you later, her boyfriend found me on PDX Real and said, "I think you live in the neighborhood. The county has some sites planned. The city's looking at a sanctioned campsite. Can we talk about this? Can we talk about what this looks like?" And then I called some people, and next thing I knew, there were 5 strong women who said, maybe we could do a series of things, including a town hall. Do you think anyone will show up? And so I'm honored. It's such a beautiful day today. It's not quite spring, sure looks like it. I don't know about you, but I'd love to be in my garden, and I bet you would too. So the fact that you're here, I want to say thank you. We're starting somewhere here as a community here today. We're going to have different perspectives about things as neighbors in this community, whether it's Montavilla or it be citywide. And it's my perspective that people's opinions make good governing. Government cannot create community, you guys. That's up to us. And I've never lived in a place that talks more about community than Portland, yet I'd like to say I think we have a long way to go to have a strong community here. We're facing some pretty intense things in Portland right now with our livability. We have a lot of people living outdoors. We have a lot of people that are underneath the clutches of drug addiction. We have mentally ill that are unhelped. And a lot of us are sitting around waiting for our city and government to tell us how they're going to fix it. And I'd like to submit to you that we should be involved in those decisions too. They'll make better decisions with us involved. And I think that as Mayor Wheeler is going to speak, I think he'd agree with me on that. My hope today is that you're going to see and hear things that you can do that are tangible to help improve this community and to help it heal. I want you to give your time and your opinion and your perspective to your community. Not doing so is frankly selfish. You're here in Portland right now with these challenges for a reason. I believe that. I wanted to, before I have the distinct honor and pleasure of introducing our mayor, and before I do that, I wanted to be fair to the mayor. A lot of people think that what's happening in Portland rests squarely on the mayor, and that's not true. The mayor is one of 5 people, 4 other commissioners that make decisions about Portland, and he also has to work with the county. Multnomah County is responsible for things that have to do with really human services, shelter, administering things. We have a slide. Is there anybody? Nobody's running this slide. Can somebody switch that for me? That's the one thing we didn't do. We set it all up and yeah, it's so funny. Just, oh, is it off now? It was just the cursors. So that's Joe Jones that was just up. Flip it again. Excuse me. This is me.
One more.
Okay, hold it there. Thank you. Steve, would you just like take that and flip it over whenever for me? Would you just get it? Yeah. Find somebody to do it or do it. You can take it off the charger. It's fine. Okay, thank you. Oh gosh, that was embarrassing. Okay. So I just wanted to give you this visual. We have about 40,000 followers now on 2 platforms. I'm pretty proud of that. Thank you, Jeff, also. Not bad for a little Portland social media. Anyway, the city you can see here on the slides, these are the things the city is responsible for. You know, police, fire, EMT, city parks, water, think of them about infrastructure. County is responsible for things like human services, disability, shelters, detox, mental health. I'm not going to read it over, but I want you to be aware of that. So right now with what's happening with the crisis in Portland is both entities are trying to impact change. Both the city and county have some plans to try to help the people that are out on the streets and hopefully make sure that citizens also are not impacted negatively, like in terms of their business and so forth. So I just want you to keep this in mind because the mayor is not able to make decisions for the county, and some of those situations are separate. So the Volunteers of American site across the street is no longer being considered by the city of Portland for a sanctioned camp. However, thank you. However, those are planned throughout the city, and I have to say, this is my opinion, not anybody official, but my opinion is that we're gonna need to do something, and I do support the mayor and the commissioners in their pursuit that people need to go to at a location and be helped and triaged for whatever's going on and why they're out there. So, at any rate, there are 2 sites still planned by the county. You'll notice no one from the county is here today. That isn't because they weren't invited, just the same as the mayor in all the ways the mayor and his staff was invited. So I just want to make that clear. The county has 2 sites on 82nd that they've spent roughly $5 million for. Those are, the developer actually that sold those properties is here today. He sold them because he was having so many problems with the property that he just was like, it's time to sell. So anyway, those are going to be parking lots apparently for people to park and camp. One of them is next to what is currently the Needle Exchange, and you'll hear from some people that have lived by that and had some challenges. That has nothing to do with the mayor. I wanted to make that clear. Mayor Wheeler is here today to hear what we have to say. Whatever you've heard about Mayor Wheeler, if you think he's not a brave man, you're wrong. He showed up today without an organized group, without really knowing us ladies, and he's trusting that he can come here on a Saturday, on I assume his day off, although I assume you work 7 days a week, to listen to where people are at and try to influence and heal this city. He's one man. He can't do it himself. He needs you involved. Don't think you don't have a part in this, because you do. It is such an honor, Mayor Wheeler, to invite you up here. We'd love to hear you talk for a few minutes if you want to talk to us about anything with your plans, and then Joan will come up and go through a series of questions that people have turned in via 3.5 cards. Let's give him a warm welcome, please.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you for that introduction. That was the best one and the clearest one I think I've had in years. Thank you.
Please say that.
I will. I just was commenting to Angela how much I appreciate the context that she established for this conversation, because it is complex. And I acknowledge that probably the main reason people are here today is around homelessness, although there are probably a number of people here who are concerned about safety. Everybody here is obviously concerned about livability. We're here on a beautiful Saturday because we love the community and we care. And our community has been traumatized over a period of years. And I want you to know I understand that. And it makes me sad, as somebody who was born and raised here, somebody who loves this community, somebody who has chosen public service, to see the state of our city. Now, I am encouraged by the steps we're taking. I have great confidence in the future of this city, and I actually believe it will recover much more quickly than a lot of the naysayers are suggesting. I want to start with the question of homelessness, and I'm going to try and be as brief as possible because I want to leave time for you. But there are sort of two big issues around homelessness that I hear about every single day, usually multiple times a day, and sometimes in very heated exchanges. What I hear from people is that they expect a compassionate and effective set of strategies and solutions to help people get off the street and stay off the street. I hear with equal intensity that as much as this is a humanitarian catastrophe for people living on the streets, it's also having a significant impact on all of us, on every neighborhood, in terms of safety, in terms of livability, in terms of economic prosperity, in terms of public health, and that's undeniable. And so I have established for me what the North Star is. And a lot of people don't agree with my North Star. And that's fine. We don't have to agree. In fact, if you ever get into a room and everybody agrees on everything in the context of government, that is a very unhealthy democracy. So it's okay if you disagree, even strongly disagree with me. But here's what I believe. I believe that there should be no unsanctioned homeless camps anywhere in the city of Portland. And I'll explain why in a minute. I also believe that we shouldn't just be sweeping people from one area to the next, to the next, to the next. That is not an effective strategy to end homelessness. And Angela is 100% right when she says, look, you also need to connect well, first of all, everybody who's homeless needs a place to live. And there's a lot of work going on the housing side of this, but there's a lot of people on our streets who self-report that they're struggling with substance use disorders, with behavioral health issues, with general health issues. There's a lot of people who are looking for opportunities around employment that are struggling to get back into the workforce for various reasons. We need to connect people to services to help them get off and stay off the street. So that's my strategy. We're going to create these areas where people can come closer to the services that are provided, because 95% of the people on our streets today report that they are not being approached by any of our outreach workers, not for housing, not for shelter, not for behavioral health services, not for substance use disorder treatment, nothing. 95%. So we have to bring the services closer to the people who need those services to connect them to those services. And yes, I also believe that the public right-of-ways should be accessible for the public. And I do not support having people camp wherever they want, anywhere in the city of Portland. And I've bypassed the bureaucracy by issuing executive directives around safe routes to school, around high crash corridors, around certain geographic locations. But we also have to be mindful of the Ninth Circuit Court and their determination that we connect people to alternatives. And so as we expand our capacity to deliver services, we will also continue to sequentially reduce the areas where people are camping. And I just want to remind people, there's a lot of people who fundamentally disagree. They say you should not move people who are homeless, period. You should let them continue to be where they are and develop whatever community they're developing where they are. Personally, since I'm standing in a church, and by the way, Bill, thank you so much for giving us this space today. We really appreciate it. For me, everybody has their own set of values. For me, it is not humane for people to live in dangerous and squalid conditions. For me, it is not acceptable to have people who need our services desperately to go without. And for me, when people tell me, I don't support your strategy, I ask them a couple of very specific questions. Okay, 200 people died on our streets last year. That's unacceptable to me. How many is acceptable to you? 70% of the traffic, the pedestrian deaths last year in this city were homeless individuals, many crossing freeways and other dangerous intersections to get to their camp. How many are acceptable to you? 30% of the people who died in fires, structural fires in our city last year, 30% were homeless individuals. And as somebody who spends a lot of time in the wilderness, I'm telling you, dying in a tent fire is not, I would never wish that on anybody under any circumstances, anywhere. 30% of the fire deaths in this city were people in unsanctioned camps. How many are acceptable? And so I've answered that question clearly and definitively. And the answer for me is 0. And the only way we're going to get to 0 is by not having unsanctioned tent camping all over the city of Portland. So I have answered it before God and before you. That's my answer. And if you are opposed to these strategies, that's fine, but then you have to answer that question. How much is enough? Where do you draw the line? So that's where I am on homelessness. Public safety. I made a pledge about a year ago, and a lot of people laughed when I said it. People, even reporters, laughed when I said I'm going to bring on 300 more personnel in the Portland Police Bureau over a 3-year period. And people said, in this environment, you're going to recruit police officers, you're going to recruit other personnel, public safety personnel, ain't going to happen. We hired 91 officers last year and 30 PS3s, public safety support specialists, also trained, also certified. They don't carry a firearm, but they can assist the police in a variety of ways. So that's well over 100. We are ahead of schedule in delivering on that pledge. And that's not the only thing we're doing. We're doing a lot of non-policing solutions too. We could talk about the focused intervention team, the enhanced community safety team around gun violence. We could also talk about the partnerships we've developed in the community to work with people who are at high risk or who are exposed to criminal activity in this community. My focus has been gun violence, but we're also doing retail theft operations. I know people are really mad about the rate of auto thefts, so we're working with our police officers, We're engaging in a partnership with the governor and the state police and the district attorney and the Multnomah County Correction System to really get those high-level offenders who operate all of those operations. We're going to get them, and we're going to hold them accountable because people are tired, particularly lower-income people who depend on their cars for their employment. People are tired of having their cars stolen or their catalytic converters ripped off the bottom, which effectively renders your car useless. And it's an expensive fix. And we're working with retailers who are tired of people coming in en masse and stealing from them and their employees. And don't think it doesn't impact the employees. So those are areas. Livability, and then I'll shut up, I promise. We had to reinvent how we address graffiti and litter in this city. When I took office, there were multiple different franchises for multiple different kinds of locations, and there was virtually no money going into graffiti abatement anywhere in the city of Portland. We reinvented the system. We created something called the Portland Environmental Management Office, PEMO. The Portland Environmental Management Office has increased its litter collection by 3,000% over the recent about year and a half period. Similarly with graffiti abatement. And yes, the impact reduction team works to remove problematic homeless camps. But I want you to know we don't just show up and create havoc. They go in, we have outreach workers, and we're hiring, 15 more, Bobby, I think, 15 more outreach workers. They go to the camp, and yes, they post it, but they also offer services to people in those camps as an alternative. And what we know is right now only 2 out of 10 are saying they'll go to a shelter. 2 out of 10. 6 out of 7 said they would consider going to an alternative like these encampments that my administration and the city council are proposing, provided that we don't sweep them again once they're there, provided that they have access to hygiene, which they don't have in unsanctioned camps. And hygiene is a euphemism for toilets, for sinks, for laundry, for litter collection. And best of all, connection to services. And as Angela correctly pointed out, we don't do those services. We're in infrastructure, transportation, and safety. We don't provide substance use disorder treatment at the city. We don't provide behavioral health services. That's the state and the county. And although the county officials aren't here today, I want to report to you that my relationship with the new county chair is very solid. The governor, the county chair, and I meet regularly. We met just this week, the 3 of us, and I met twice with the county chair. And this is our agenda. This is what we're working on together. And that's why I say I'm actually very optimistic about what we can accomplish. And so I'm going to stop there. This is your time. Am I supposed to sit over here, or what's your, how do you want to, this is your rodeo?
I'm going to put you to work.
Okay, great.
You pull that chair up, and I'll pull this chair up. Where do you want it? Right up here. Okay.
Great.
Thank you so much for that talk. That's very helpful. Oh.
Can you hear me? Okay, in the back, can you hear okay? Can you hear in the back okay? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Hear me? Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. Okay, awesome. Take a little break. Okay, Mayor, you kind of touched on that you and the county are working well together. Can you share a little bit more about how you are collaborating? Because I know that the 2 camps that are on 82nd are county, but you also have your own agenda of putting city putting some shelters in.
Okay, that's fine.
You're fine, Mayor. It's you, Joan.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
There we go.
So just to repeat quickly, the mayor spoke a bit about how he is working well with the county, but I would like him to elaborate a little bit more about how they share that vision and how they will work together to bring this to pass.
Coin 6, your microphone just flopped over. I don't know if that's good.
Technology.
Gotta love it. Never works when you want it to, right? An example of the way things worked before. We have what's called the Joint Office of Homeless Services, and that was set up by Chair Kafori and Mayor Hales 7-ish years ago. And the problem under the previous administration at the county was it was not really seen as joint. And I'm just being really honest with all of you. The county made the decisions. We were often not included in those decisions, but we were funders of the joint office. And it was very frustrating for me as the mayor, and it was frustrating for my colleagues on the city council. And Angela and I have spoken about the two camps that are proposed, one I believe on Stark and one I believe on Mill. I have every reason to believe that the new county chair and the Board of County Commissioners is serious about making sure that those are effective. They're not completely gelled as I understand it, and they are expecting to do more outreach with all of you. But by way of example, nobody in our office knew that those were going to actually be done. Nobody notified us, nobody talked to us, we didn't know the details, and poor Angela comes to city council and she's talking about these, and I'm like, I'm really sorry, I really don't know that much about them. So I have taken that message to the county chair, and she, as a commissioner, didn't know that much about them because the joint office has been previously run out of the chair's office. And so what she knows and the other commissioner knows was what the prior chair allowed them to know. That dynamic is now gone. And under Jessica Vega Peterson's leadership, I know she's working much, much more collaboratively with me, with the folks in my office, and I'm very optimistic about what we can do together. I believe our visions are aligned, but we're not going to be doing all the same work. We're going to more clearly delineate who does what, when, and how things are paid for. And so the city will continue to be the lead on problematic camp cleanup, on litter collection, on graffiti abatement. We'll do all those things. The county is going to join us on these larger sites, and the details are still up for discussion, but we agree, at least in principle, the county will be providing the wraparound services at these sites and the navigation to housing, which is appropriate since they have that infrastructure, they have the personnel who are trained, and that is the basis of what I think will be a solid partnership. The icing on the cake is we have a governor who wants to work with us. I have met more with our new Governor Kotek in the first 6 weeks of her administration than I did in 8 years of the prior administration. And now I've got a governor who is motivated and sees homelessness as the top issue facing this state. It's certainly the top issue facing this community. And we're working together. I'm really energized by it. This is the first time I can tell you in 6 years that I've been energized by the partnerships that we can bring to the table.
Well, that's a great segue. I just got a question from the audience. How can you be confident in the governor when she voted against and abstained from voting for substance and treatment centers for a decade?
So, I'm somewhat loath to speak for the governor. I'm sure she has her own reasons, and she should give you her reasons directly without me reinterpreting her reasons. I can only give you my reasoning. Number one, there are probably very few families represented in this room that don't have somebody they love and care about who has or is currently struggling with a substance use disorder or a behavioral health issue. I can speak very clearly. We've had all of these issues in the Wheeler household. And so I understand what can happen at the personal level. I also understand that I'm in a state that often talks a good game. We like to view ourselves as progressives. And yet, for 40 years, this state has lagged the rest of the nation when it comes to access to behavioral health services. This is not new. This is not a surprise to anyone. This is intentional. When you do something once, that may be an accident. When you do it twice, it's because you're a slow learner. But when you do it over the course of decades, that is intentional. And we intentionally dismantled our state mental health infrastructure and did not replace it with adequate support services at the community level. And that's not to say there aren't phenomenal efforts, great organizations, and some people who I think are close to saintly in terms of their work with people in our community on both of those fronts. But the bottom line is we're rebuilding the infrastructure, and isn't it ironic that at the city level, at the municipal level, where we have nothing to do with it, we are trying to lead in terms of reconnecting that infrastructure to the people who most desperately need it on our streets. And from everything I've heard from the governor up to this point, she supports us. She put forward a package at $155 million, which I testified in person to support. A lot of that will go towards these kinds of services. But there's also more that we need from the legislature. We need direct ability to fund the kinds of programs that we're trying to set up at the municipal level. The reason is, quite frankly, it's just a quirk of politics. State governments move a lot more slowly than local governments. Why? Because all politics is local. You all know who I am. Do you know who your state representative is? Do you know who your state senator is? Do you know what bills are in the legislature? And I'm not saying as a criticism. I don't know, right? She does. And so we're urgent here. We're urgent because when people die on the streets, I take that very seriously. It's personal for me. And so I would say that the relationship is better. No, our legislature has not stepped up the way it needs to with the urgency it needs to around behavioral health or substance use disorder. Measure 110 overwhelmingly supported the goal there. What was sold to the voting public was, yes, we will decriminalize some personal amounts of drugs, but the main event was supposed to be the establishment of substance use disorder treatment statewide, including a lot of it right here in the metro area. And here we are 2 years later, and we've seen the decriminalization of hard drugs, but we're not seeing the treatment be put into place. And I'm not going to lie to you, I'm pissed about that. It needs to happen, and it needs to happen urgently. And if it doesn't happen, then we need to rethink the basic tenets of that ballot measure. If it's not working, then let's just admit it and let's move on to something that does.
Thank you. I just want to say we had some questions ready for the mayor, but I just have to say thank you because you have brought forth some amazing questions, and I'm going to put ours aside and I'm going to ask your questions. So this is audience questions. Why are all the Safe Camp proposals always set to be located in lower income or more socioeconomically challenged areas?
That is absolutely a fair criticism. It is a well-founded criticism, and it is something that I have taken to heart, my staff has taken it to heart, as we locate our proposed alternative shelter sites, service hubs, whatever you want to call them. I don't think we've landed on the right branding yet. They have to be geographically diverse. And I can tell you point blank, there is a location that we are looking at that would be considered the opposite of what you just described. We're getting a lot of blowback. I fully expected that. You're right. I'm sort of used to blowback at this point. But I agree with you. And by the way, it not only sends the wrong message about government's view towards people who live in less wealthy circumstances, it also sends the wrong message about what our objectives are and what our moral underpinnings are. And so as we solve this horrific crisis of homelessness, we're all going to have to share some of the burden. There's no easy way out of this. I just want to be really clear. I wish there was a painless way out of the homeless crisis. But if it's there, I can't find it. And if somebody knows a painless way out of the homeless crisis, let me know. And by the way, the answer isn't if only we create more housing. We all know we need more housing, but it'll take years to close the 20,000 unit gap of housing that we have in our community. Years. And in the meanwhile, hundreds of people die every year on our streets. And we continue to have the livability, safety, environmental, public health issues associated with unfettered, unrestricted camping throughout the community. So I'm asking everyone in this community to bear some of the cost and some of the burden associated with solving this crisis. And the flip side of this agreement is we're going to measure our results and we're going to report to you on those results. We need the baseline. So my first ask of people in the areas where we have these designated sites, and by the way, this neighborhood is not on the radar for one of those designated sites, but I'm telling people in neighborhoods that are, we need to know what the status quo is. We can measure crime activity, we can measure traffic fatalities, we can measure some of that stuff related to infrastructure pretty well and get our baseline. But in terms of where everybody is who is homeless and where the encampments are and how big they are, we really need the public's help by identifying them on the Portland Reporter, the PDX Reporter, because that gives us a baseline. And if you have the time and the energy to do that, that would certainly be helpful to us.
Thank you. What are the metrics that will be used to determine the success or failure of these camps?
So we are working with the neighborhoods directly. I had my first spirited meeting yesterday with one of the encampments in Close-In on the east side of the river, and I'll tell you what I told them. We have our metrics. I mean, my metrics are how many people are served, how long are they staying in the camp, how quickly are they being referred to services, and how quickly are they getting off the street, and I want longitudinal data. I also want to know a year from now, 2 years from now, how many are successful in remaining in housing as a result of those services. But I also told the neighborhood, look, if there's other metrics you want us to measure and put on the dashboard and report out to the public, there are probably things I hadn't thought about, and a couple of people suggested some things they would be interested in. I'd be interested in that. How many are referred to state services around behavioral health? Somebody asked how many are going into private treatment versus a government treatment program. Where are they going? How many are from out of town? And are they reconnected with their families wherever back home happens to be? And so we have no monopoly on the truth when it comes to how to measure this. I would measure it and how I will measure it, but if people have other ideas about how we should be evaluating the success of this model, I'm very open-minded about it.
So to follow up on that, because this is a county and city project, you both have different projects, who is ultimately accountable for how this goes down?
Yeah, so I don't mind saying I am for this one. For the encampments that are being proposed, Commissioner Ryan and I collectively introduced 5 resolutions around affordable housing, around incentivizing people to seek treatment and other services to help them get off and stay off the streets, around rationalizing our homeless services system in the city of Portland by coordinating all of our bureaus through something called the Street Services Coordination Center, and we're hoping to connect that to county and state efforts as well. And of course, the part of this that got the most attention was the creation of these service hubs or alternative shelter sites or whatever people want to call them, and bringing the services together. I've put enough of my own blood, sweat, and tears into that I can say I will be held accountable for either the success or the failure of those camps. My colleagues alongside of me who support it, they will be held accountable, and I'm perfectly happy being held accountable for that. I think it's right.
So what or which services will be available to support these campers? And what about the larger community? For example, trash removal, police response, keeping our children safe when they are on their way to school.
All right, and if I forget the second half of that, you'll remind me. I do that, I start into my things, sometimes I forget the end of the question. But with regard to the services that are available at the camps, definitely, as I indicated earlier, stability, hygiene, litter collection. There will be safety because these encampments will have rules. They are not open, by the way. You will be referred in, and visitors are not allowed. There are standards that are expected within the camps. We're working with what's called Work Systems, Inc., which is The federal funding for workforce development that comes into the state comes through a workforce board. And we're working with those folks to create employment opportunities, job training, to get people who've been out of the workforce for a long time back into the workforce. And we're hearing from homeless individuals directly that they struggle to get back into the workforce. And so we're trying to create a tailored program. There will be case management for individuals in these camps, behavioral health, substance use disorder treatment. We're working with the district attorney on an incentivization program that if people seek the treatment they need to get off the streets, we could get rid of old outstanding fines and fees and some of the warrants that hold people back from seeking those services, especially from government entities. So those are just a few of the things that we're doing in those encampments. And then the second part of that was...
They want to know, so outside those camps, the surrounding areas.
Thank you. Yeah, so let me give you just a case study. So we did something similar to what's proposed here. In the context of these camps, there's a 1,000-foot perimeter around the camps where people will be engaged by the service provider, and they already do this in their home community in Los Angeles, which is where the service provider is from. But we did something similar to this called a 90-day reset in Old Town. Old Town had the highest rates of gun violence, a lot of criminal activity, a lot of theft, a lot of assaults. And what we saw after the 90-day reset, when we did the same kind of engagement, the same kind of cleaning up of problematic homeless encampments, the same kind of outreach to individuals who are in those encampments, concentrated and focused livability, abatement issues, we saw it go from the #1 gun violence area of the city to having 0 incidents of gun violence. And similarly, criminal activity dropped off precipitously. Other livability issues dropped off precipitatively. And even past the 90 days, now we're several months out, the results are still holding up. And so we're really happy about that. I think that's the best example I can give. It's not exactly analogous to what's proposed with the encampments, but it shows that if you focus, if you set clear rules and clear expectations, and then follow up with the resources, it will actually make a difference not only for the individuals needing those services and needing to get off the streets, but it also improves the health of the surrounding community. One last thing I wish I'd remembered for the first part of the question, because it's key. You know, why are these camps different? There's a lot of differences, but there's one that's fundamentally important. Most homeless camps of any type, anywhere, have staffing ratios that are usually like 1 to 40-ish. That's sort of the standard here in the Portland area, about 1 to 40, one staffer for every 40 people. I spoke to a guy the other day. He heads up the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness. In other words, he's the Biden administration's point person for homelessness nationally. He worked for a shelter that had a 1 to 100 ratio. These encampments will have a 1 to 15 ratio. So it is an intensive experience for the people living there, intensive case management, regular check-ins, regular conversations about what people need and what expectations there are. And so I feel that's something that's fundamentally different that we really haven't been doing in this community.
And to follow that up, will there always be somebody on premises that is a staffer or a...
24/7, round the clock, all the time. There'll be multiple.
Okay.
In fact, part of this model that was attractive to me, I've taken a lot of people down to LA and look at the encampments they have. For people who are in higher acuity situations, read significant threat of overdosing or other medical problems, they do check-ins every 20 minutes round the clock. Now, it doesn't mean they're waking people up, but they will have flaps on the tents, or it looks like we may be migrating now to rigid pods, thanks to the help of the governor. There will be regular checks on people every 20 minutes round the clock. And it will always have security It will always have personnel who are engaged on site 24/7. And by the way, this is not a community-led model. This is not, this is not that. So this will not be led by the people there. This is led very much by the service provider under the rules that we have established that have proven to be effective elsewhere.
Do you foresee having greater police presence around some of these camps?
So not in the immediate perimeter and certainly not in the camp, because we know that for a lot of people on the streets, their relationship with the police is not good. Moreover, it's not a good use of police resources. Our police officers are working tirelessly right now to deal with higher acuity issues, and that's where I need them focused, and that's where they want to be. In a city where we have a lot of significant gun violence issues, we had just two shootings last night that kept a lot of our police bureau up round the clock last night. I want them focused on that. In the perimeter, it's the service provider's responsibility to maintain order, maintain cleanliness, maintain that 1,000-foot perimeter. This service provider is very good at doing it. They don't call it patrolling, they call it engagement. And it's a methodical, longer-term, interactive process, and for them, it has worked really well. Now, if we have a problem with criminality, either within or outside of that 1,000-foot perimeter, of course, the police can still engage. But it's my hope that we don't have to use police resources for what can actually be solved by non-police professionals. That's our goal. That's not to say there won't be a problem from time to time in the neighborhood that does require police engagement. Of course, there will be. But that's not the first thing that we're trying here.
So how will campers be screened, and will anything be expected of them to contribute?
Yes. So they will be screened by service providers. Let me roll back. We have not completed the screening profile process yet, just FYI. But we will probably be starting with a similar profile to what's currently being used by our service provider called Urban Alchemy. They will be referred in as people who are ready to be connected to services, or at least expressing an interest. Not everybody's going to go to one of these encampments. And I want to be really clear. Some people still go to shelter. Some people still go to other alternative villages. And some people will just say, we don't want to be in this encampment for whatever reason, and they'll leave. That's fine. It's a free country. We're not making people go to these encampments. But we will continue, as we expand the encampments, to enforce no camping ordinances in the city of Portland. But the expectations will be clear. There will be no weapons in the camp, number one. Number two, there will be no use of drugs or alcohol in any common space. There's a lot of people at these camps who are going to try treatment. And those of you who've been through this process, to be in a treatment environment where there's people in close proximity using drugs or alcohol, it makes it really, really hard for one to be successful. There will be no children, at least in this first encampment that we've created. It will be adults, men and women. We will allow couples, and that's been an impediment to a lot of people wanting to come out of their encampment and go in. We will consider moving groups of people together if they've created some sense of a community out on the streets and they want to move as a community. We're very open to that as well. At 10 o'clock, the camp closes. At 10 o'clock, everybody lights out. 10 o'clock, everybody's quiet, and we will enforce noise and activities in the camp. People are expected to do that. Urban Alchemy has told me, because I asked, I said, well, what percentage of people don't do that and ultimately have to leave? And the answer is close to zero. And again, it's through engagement. And by the way, the people at Urban Alchemy, I maybe should have said this earlier, they're people, all of whom have lived experience. And many of them have criminal records. And they've recovered their lives. They've served their time. They're clean. They're sober. And they want to turn around. They want to help other people. And they're highly motivated. And they speak with a lot of credibility when they're speaking to people who are still out there on the streets, still struggling.
Okay, well, we have lots of questions, but I know that your time is
Okay,
come.
I'll try to be shorter. Sorry, I am talkative, as my dad used to say. I'll be speeder.
Yeah.
That's
it's-
fine. I can stay a little longer. I've talked, people came.
Okay.
I can stay a little longer.
Awesome. What improvements are being planned for mental health and substance dependence issue within the houseless community?
So this, in my opinion, is a huge step forward. It builds on another innovation that was led at the city level, the Portland Street response, which allowed the police not to have to respond every time somebody's in crisis on the streets. I mean, obviously, if they're a threat to themselves or somebody else, the police do have to intervene. But the Portland Street response has been a good and effective response. And ultimately, the next level of innovation has to be to address the problems at the scale that they exist here in the community today. And that means I need the support of the county for the wraparound services and access to their professionals and their contractors. Mm-hmm. And I need the support of the state, which controls the funding for all of this. And by the way, yes, I have also heavily lobbied the Biden administration. We want to be able to use Medicaid dollars for reimbursement for the services we're providing. We don't have enough money at the local level to be able to do what we need to do at the scale that it needs to be done. And the administration is listening. The head of usage is here in the community next week. I've met with the Secretary of HUD, I think no fewer than 3 times. They're watching this, and they think this is a model that shows a lot of promise.
Okay. When deciding on locations for houseless individual services, do you consider the saturation of the community beyond the capacity of that community?
Yes. I think that's sort of a rephrase of the question earlier. Are we going to concentrate this in neighborhoods that already have a lot of services and are already doing their part? And the effort here is no, not to do that.
So the 2 that are still in the planning stages for our immediate area are county.
The county one, correct.
And the city is not necessarily looking in our area now.
We're not. I can tell you as of today, we did look at the Gleason site, but for a lot of reasons it didn't pan out, and this is just one of them.
So I know that you're not in charge of the county choices, but do you know where they are in their planning? Is this a done deal?
I don't know.
Okay.
I honestly don't know.
Okay, can you define the service hub model and how this part of the overall plan to improve the livability in Portland?
Yeah, and I feel like I covered that. So again, it's connection to, identified sites, connections to services. In terms of the livability piece, we're making a commitment to the communities in which they're located that we will absolutely monitor what's going on. We'll continue to do what we do through PMO for the Environmental Management Office. I see this as really the only effective strategy that I can think of to start reducing and ultimately eliminating unsanctioned camping in the city of Portland. And again, I want you to know that I'm hearing the 2 strong messages that I opened with. Get rid of the unsanctioned homeless camps, but be compassionate and give people meaningful, workable alternatives to get off and stay off the streets by connecting to services. This model does both.
So you said that people aren't required, obviously, to go to a sanctioned camp, but you are going to be continuing to sweep where people are choosing to camp unsanctioned.
That's correct.
Okay.
And I want to give you a little bit of anecdotal information here. You may recall that some months ago, I passed an executive directive calling for the removal of homeless campsites, unsanctioned campsites in high crash corridors. That was not a popular decision for some. But a few days after that executive directive was passed, an errant driver, went off the road and ran over a number of homeless campers in Salem, killing them. We now have about three-ish months of data from that. It's a little early to declare victory, but the most recent traffic fatality data says that even though traffic fatalities in Portland unfortunately remain at a very high level, about 70 over the course of the last year, the percentage of those traffic pedestrian fatalities of homeless individuals was cut basically in half. That's good results. And so I think we're going to continue to see results. If we know that, 30% of the deaths of fires are people trying to keep themselves warm in a tent. And by the way, open heat sources and fires will not be allowed in these encampments because we have non-open fire heat sources available to us through those encampments. And we also know that homeless individuals are disproportionately impacted by gun violence. There won't be weapons in these camps. So I think we're directly addressing some of the complexities around this. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, but I'm not going to let perfect be the enemy of the good. I think it will be better. That's what I can promise. It will be better. It will not be perfect, it will be better. It's a step down the path towards helping people recover their lives and helping us restore access to our public spaces.
Okay, one last question because we have a second half here, but what are the consequences of if people continue to camp on the street, what will be their consequences if they don't take services?
So ultimately, you would be cited for trespassing and you would be removed. But I hope that doesn't have to happen. But at the end of the day, we will enforce the ordinances that are already on the books.
Okay. All right. Angela would like to come up and give you a little thank you and send you on your way.
All right. To be continued. Look, I really appreciate having been invited, and it was a little last minute, so I didn't exactly have as much time as probably you all would have liked. So I apologize for that, but the fact that you came out on a beautiful Saturday, really the warmest, nicest one we've had, I take that as a strong statement of the importance of this and the importance of the city and your desire to see us be effective and accountable to you in terms of how we do it. I'm just going to assume that. I appreciate you all being here. I really do. Thank you. Should I stay here?
So, Mayor, you might know that I'm a designer for a living. That's my business. So don't hold that against me that this is a chair. But, we are so honored that you would come and sit down with us. And as I said before, you didn't know what you were going to expect. We've seen on the news that sometimes whenever you show up, terrible things happen. So, that's sort of a joke. But we all signed this, and this is for us symbolism about we want to be involved in what's going on in our community. We don't want it all to be on your shoulders. We think you're going to make better decisions if we're involved, and this is our commitment to you.
Thank you.
So this is for your bookshelf.
I see what that is.
Paperweight.
That's a seat at the table.
Yes, it's a seat at the table, and it's heavy. So when I give it to you, be prepared. Okay,
I will.
Thank you for coming,
Angela. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Kat. I am a Montavilla resident, and it's a total honor to be here, and it's super great to see so many people who showed up. Not loud enough? Hang on. How about now? Or now? Okay. So I just bought my first home on Pine Street off of 82nd from a good friend that had lived there for about 7 years. And after like a year of lockdowns and isolation, I just needed to move towards more security. And the rent for my studio apartment had just been raised to about $1,800 a month, which is basically a mortgage. So I made the leap. My first house is special to me. As someone who's been working since I was about 12, being able to afford a modest house for the first time in my life is a big deal. But that excitement and joy was quickly soured. On my block, there have been shootings, break-ins, constant drug dealing and use, theft of all kinds, so much to the point that the RV business on the corner had to leave the area entirely. We clean up human waste, garbage, needles, and watch unhoused residents in various stages of mental and physical distress. I've watched neighbors be threatened with weapons, cars dropped, and then stripped of all their parts and eventually become locations for drug dealing and use. At one point, when the camp on my street was at its worst, there were people dealing drugs right on my doorstep, and there was little to no police support to be had, and definitely no real assistance for the people experiencing so much anguish on the street. As a result, I did what a lot of people have done, which is I formed relationships with my neighbors for support. I lived abroad for spans of time in my life, and outside of the things you miss when you're not on American soil, it always struck me that people in the Pacific Northwest are kind. We are kind, we're a little passive-aggressive, and unfortunately, we're very conflict avoidant. But it's been years of this, and we've got empathy fatigue. We also have an environment of polarization where any protest is seen as hate, any pushback worthy of slurs and othering. When you feel stepped on over by people being awful to you and your neighbors, even the kindest, most progressive people get angry. Housed or not, when a neighbor repeatedly endangers others and doesn't treat anybody else with respect, it's hard to maintain grace. When one also considers that we pay some of the highest taxes in the nation to live in this city and state, the doubled standard of behavior limitations is the frosting on the cake. I don't know how to balance progressive ideals with the reality of running a city, but in Portland, we're really great at doubling down on failing policies. If it's broken, we decide to throw more money at it. We've subsidized homelessness, eliminated consequences for bad behavior, and leave the homeless vulnerable to unchecked drug dealing in our streets and literally hand out needles and supplies to speed their death. Our approach of harm reduction is just fancy branding for keeping people out of hospitals. Because from a fiscal standpoint, it's cheaper for the government to give out needles than to treat people when they are sick or aid them to true health and well-being. We need to rethink what empathy looks like in this city. Giving people everything they need to stay on the streets indefinitely just isn't it. Thanks. We're throwing millions at this problem, and the county seems to have decided that it's just going to ram through any program it sees fit. The property at 333 Southeast 82nd was purchased last summer for more than $2 million. The notice of funding availability drafted, from what I can tell, in 2021 stated that the 2 properties were available for these projects, and that availability, or the proposals were due at the end of November 2022. So guess what didn't happen? Any communication with neighbors. No conversations were had with residents. The county knew for a long time what their plan was and didn't talk to any of the bordering neighbors. As a next-door neighbor, I knew the county was buying that lot, and I reached out multiple times to multiple people and was told each time, we don't know what the plan is. When we find out, we'll let you know. And I took them at their word. It wasn't until February that Angela informed me of the upcoming project. At that point, I reached out to one of my contacts at the county, and they finally sent me an FAQ. And in that document, drafted in December of last year, it said that residents had received a postcard. That didn't happen. First communication came to our neighborhood at large from JOHS, landed in my mailbox just 2 weeks ago. That's what the county is doing. They're making decisions about our neighborhoods in the darkness, then communicating with other officials and the public and news outlets that dialogue and community relationships are important. Meanwhile, everybody who has concerns over placement, plans, safety, or anything else program-related is silenced. So my fight is not with the unhoused residents. It's with a county that thinks it can fritter away millions of tax dollar money without any accountability or communication. It's with programs that say they are offering services when there isn't even an infrastructure to truly help reclaim people from the streets. They're putting a Band-Aid on this issue, and they don't seem to care who it affects adversely, housed or unhoused. A lot of people in Southeast Portland are solidly middle or lower class, and in our system, building security, wealth, and legacy can only be done a few ways, and property ownership is how most of us manage to do it. So it's not nothing when that's taken from you. For many people living here, your home represents a lifetime of work and sacrifice, so the idea that a government body can come in and decimate all of that value without even talking to you should make you angry. So that's why I'm here. The first step was to spread word to neighbors. We need to start talking to each other. The one thing I've noticed during this process is that most people have concerns of some kind, and when we bring them to public forums, we are gaslit and called NIMBYs. I'm here to tell you that your concerns are valid. The next step is to start documenting this process to shine a light on this shady behavior. The city and county are making plans, and we can't just sit back and wait to see what happens next. Anyways, that's it for me. Angela's next. Thank you.
So this is Julie McConnell. This is one of my dearest friends. Julie, don't cry. I asked Julie to come up here with me because sometimes whenever I don't have the right words for something, Julie helps me. So on the break, I got to talk to a few of you who said, what are we doing about this county thing? Did we bring that up, what the county's response was? It's on that. It's right next to Al. One of the things that happens to me often is that people say to me, what are we going to do? I'm making this up as I go along, like many of you are. But here's the deal. First thing starts with actively, it's just right. It's right there, right? It's right. It's a red. Okay. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I went to the county about a week ago and met on the public record at their board meeting. I want you to listen to me very carefully. The county meets every single Thursday morning at 9 o'clock in the morning. Right now, there's never a big wait, and you don't have to schedule. You just show up and you speak for 3 minutes on the public record. You need to do that. This.
Where is it located?
9th and Grand. We have a QR codes around here. I have a link in bio with PDX Real. Sorry, that QR code, if you go there, it will give you directions where to be and the time, etc. I know Jessica Vega Peterson. As a matter of fact, I supported the other candidate for chair. Regardless of that, she is our county chair. I asked her on the public record to come to this meeting, and I also emailed her. I also emailed our district representative, who, by the way, is Rosenbaum. I can't think of Commissioner Rosenbaum. Commissioner Rosenbaum and one of our legislative people, Con Pham, showed up at St. Peter Paul Church last Sunday. There were less than 10 people there to support this idea that's going to happen at 333 Southeast 82nd. But they didn't come here. Jessica Vega Peterson never answered my question if she would come or consider it, and never replied to an email. That's unacceptable, not because it's me, but because it's our neighborhood and because they haven't talked with the public. I don't know how many of you picked up whenever the mayor was speaking, but there are no requirements for these encampments in terms of drug use. Warrants, even if you're a pedophile, they're not screening for that. Does everyone know that? How many of you here can say that you have your eyes have been open when there's an encampment by your home about what it might bring to you in terms of organized crime or with our drug epidemic right now? Stand up, please. Thank you.
What I'd like to add to that is, and somewhere the email is floating around here somewhere. You know, we got an email from the county responding to our request to be at this meeting, and no, we can't come. And they gave us, some website links where we could, read about what they're doing. I don't know about you, but I know how to read. and I don't really need to do more reading on the internet. I'd like to actually speak to these people in person and have the kind of opportunity that we had here today with the mayor. Wouldn't you like that too? Okay. Well, we want to empower you to do that. Angela's found the email. And we do have, a couple really great speakers that are going to talk to you about some of these things, what it's like out on the street, what kind of solutions we can come up with. And we really are anxious to be solution-oriented. I know that you are. I am, you are. We want to make this work, right?
I wanted to circle, this is from Kay Turan, who is, excuse me.
Yeah, that's a VOA.
Oh, sorry. This is from Commissioner Rosenbaum's office. She's the only one from the county that answered us. Thank you for extending this invitation to the commissioner. Unfortunately, she's not available. However, our team would be happy to provide information about Multnomah County plans for the properties located at 333 Southeast 82nd and 1818 Southeast 82nd. As you have requested, please let me know if this would be helpful, and if so, what specific questions we can work to answer for you. In addition, we have been assured that our Joint Office of Homeless Services will work with Straightaway Services, an organization that we've selected to provide services at 333 Southeast 82nd, to develop a community engagement plan. So our team anticipates additional opportunities to hear from Montavilla community members in the coming months. What's happening in our city is that we talk all day about community and diversity, but what I notice is there's no diversity of thought allowed. And when I got involved in this 7 years ago because I was on some neighborhood pages, and I just knew that there were some pockets of people that were majorly being impacted by this drug crisis. And it wasn't everywhere yet. I knew it was coming. It's still not everywhere. But we cannot, the people that are here, over half this room stood up. You're awake. The thing is that we can't allow unhealthy people to dictate, thank you for the word, to dictate how our community is. If I had a family member, for example, that I was helping through their drug crisis, at some point I have to stop enabling them. I'm very concerned about the money that is liquidating through the homeless industrial complex. Very concerned. And I'm concerned that we keep being told that everybody just needs housing, because when you're addicted to drugs and you're mentally unwell, putting people in houses, they're going to hurt themselves and others. They need rehabilitated. I think we all know this. So what I want to ask you to do today is, I can't wave a magic wand, but what I'm going to ask you to do is, there's the Safe Rest PDX for Montavilla residents that Kat, who is here, put together. There's an email list there. We're going to have to start communicating, you guys. We have to stop operating in a silo. And through PDX Real, for example, we have a pretty large reach, and your stories are really valuable to the community so that we can start to wake up Portlanders about how people are being impacted when we have mentally unwell and drug-addicted people that are living outdoors surrounding residential homes and businesses, and schools, and children. So I wanted today, I'm coming full circle on this problem a little bit, and this last part of what we wanted to impart to you. I've decided that I'm not really sure the government can fix this issue. I think the government just wants to get bigger and hire more people and get more programs, and that's what I think's happening. And so early on, whenever I was talking about, community, one of the things that whenever I was saying there is no community without you guys, that was what my point was. I can't tell you what to do in this fight because we all have different ideas, we all have different abilities, and we all have, honestly, different levels of how we can be involved. I know some of you that are here, we have people here from fire today, we have people here that work for the county here, people that work for the city. We have a lot of community members here that have different levels of how they can speak up, but all of us can make a difference here in our own way. I'm starting to think maybe we start some kind of outreach where we start going out and talking to these people and figuring out what it is that they need and start giving them words of uplifting to get out of their situation. It's being tolerated, and it's no way to live. But I don't have all the answers, so I'm here to ask you to help. Anyway, I don't want to go on too far, but I do want to introduce somebody who I think has done incredible things in Portland, and I want you to be aware of this in case it will inspire you. Kevin Dahlgren is on Twitter. Kevin goes out nearly every day and talks with people on the streets. He has personally been responsible in his talking with them and encouraging them day after day, having people that have gotten off of drugs, gotten treatment, and have returned to their families and the community, and their lives are better. He's straight talk, he's kind, and he's fearless. And I'd like Kevin to inspire us because I think we need some inspiration right now. Kevin, where's he sitting now? There he is. Come on up.
Thank you, Angela. I appreciate it. Yes, my name is Kevin Dahlgren. I've been doing street homeless outreach in Portland, Oregon for the last 28 years. I got into this field, actually it really started before that as a part of my church in the late 80s. I was doing outreach in downtown Portland, Old Town, which in those days, that's where all the homeless were, and it was a relatively easy job to do. And then I entered social services professionally in the middle 90s, not really knowing what I was doing. So I got my education, I got hired at the first nonprofit, and just trusted the system, relied on my supervisors. Unbeknownst to me, I was part of the problem because I was not trained the right way and we were not out there trying to make any real difference. So it took time for me to start noticing, and it took me a lot longer to make real change because once I noticed and spoke up, they silenced me. They said, Kevin, that's not what we do in social services. You just blindly follow your supervisors, the nonprofits, the city, the county, and the state. And it was very frustrating, and that frustration grew year after year. And finally, I just made a decision. I only wanted to work for programs I truly believed in that were making real differences. And luckily, over the last few years, I have found those great programs. What I will say in a nutshell with this system, which I have seen over the last 28 years, is what once was a cause has become this multi-million-dollar industry. It truly did feel like a cause back in the day. A lot of caring people, I believe, trying to make a difference. Some shift happened, really more so in the last 5 to 6 years. We've all seen it. Portland has become very radicalized. And as Angela said, anytime you have an opinion, you are doxxed, you are hated, you are called a racist, you are called a fascist, which just doesn't make any sense at all. And the problem with that criticism is when I ask them, all right, so what's your idea? What's your plan? They never have one. And so I always say, don't complain unless you have a better solution. And they almost never do. Or what I've witnessed is they never do. So as Angela says, I do go out into Portland and do intensive outreach virtually every day. I made the decision a couple years ago to start interviewing the people I worked with because people weren't listening to me or any other professional or any other outreach worker because they've all heard it, saying all the right things, and nothing's getting done. So once I started interviewing the homeless and posting their interviews and they're telling me truth on the streets, that's when everything changed. Then people are like, oh my God, this is real. And what I've learned, especially in Portland, Oregon the last year, and I've personally interviewed over 200 street homeless Portlanders, is 95+% have told me I am the first outreach worker to ever talk to them. And that is what I hear, it's almost guaranteed. Now, they are almost always in shock when I approach them and they're like, wait, what? You want to talk about housing? And while homeless people are very complex, I'm a drug and alcohol counselor by trade. There's a high percentage of addiction usage on the street, mental illness, and a lot of trauma. And when people ask me, what are the root causes of homelessness? And everyone has a different opinion. Affordable housing, addiction, mental illness, family estrangement, systemic racism, or, capitalism, which I hear. Well, you know what? Talking to these really thousands of homeless over the last couple decades, it's childhood trauma is what seems to be the case about 90% of the time. Childhood trauma leads to addiction, mental illness, and all the other barriers in their life. So it's important to remember, working with the homeless, be aware, even the biggest hot mess you've ever seen in your life that's making you crazy, something probably happened to them along the way. That's not to justify their behavior, but for you just to know where they're coming from. And as Angela said, she said, I have courage. It's true. You kind of go out there and you have to have courage because not all interactions go well the first time. And I usually just stand my ground and let them process, and they might F you this and F you this and threaten, but the most magical thing happens if you don't run, which, by the way, all nonprofits, the city and the county are trained to do. The second it gets heated, you leave. That's the worst thing you could do, because you stand your ground and you just let them do their thing. As long as you don't feel any risk of physical violence, within 5 minutes they're like, all right, what do you want? And then 10 minutes later, guess what? They're probably hugging you because they're so shocked that you didn't give up on them. And this is what happens every day I'm out there. They're suspicious of me. They don't know what I'm doing here. They says, what are your motives? Are you a cop? I don't understand. Once I build that trust, and that is key to real outreach, is build trust and bring back hope. Because you build the trust, which is, the homeless, for very good reasons, have a strong mistrust in the system. And while I'm a big believer in accountability and responsibility from them, I'm also a big believer in accountability of our system to do their damn job, which isn't getting done. So I always, remind them and acknowledge their frustration. And while I am so active and vocal in the community is because this is a humanitarian crisis and something we can end in months, not years, if we all work together. Roll up our sleeves, stop relying, as people here said today, on government, because guess what? It is not going to happen. I am a volunteer when I'm in Portland, and any of you can do this. Any of you can go out, pick up trash, volunteer, get to know the homeless, learn their situation, and try to connect them to the right services. Yes, there should be paid professionals do this, but there really isn't. And so I care deeply about my community. I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. I lived 10 years in Astoria when I was a little kid, and actually grew up right next to the Goonies house and watched them film the movie. So that was pretty cool. And I was the same age as those kiddos. But so born in Portland, moved to Astoria, then came back to Portland in about 1984 or 5. So I've been here my entire life, and my number one mission in the world is to end this crisis in Portland, Oregon, which I know I can do. And the question isn't if, but the question is when. It will happen, but it's going to take all of us working together to do it. So thank you.
So we have another guest that we're going to ask to come up here, and I'm not going to try to say his last name. He's going to tell it to you. This is Al, and he lives in the Pearl, and he is now experiencing, his community is experiencing what it's like to have a site near his home, and he's going to share what he and his neighbors have done to try to deal with it. So, Al.
As you said, so my name is Alberto Santabayo, but please call me Al. I'm glad we had the two speakers before because they really set up a lot of stuff that I want to say. Louder? I live about a block from the proposed Northwest NATO Safe Rest Village site and another block from the current River District Navigation Center set up by the Harbor of Hope. Having had the Navigation Center for 4 years has given me a very good feel about what I can expect from promises and from good neighbor agreements. Let me stress, whatever you hear about good neighbors agreement is absolutely useless. I don't mean they're not as good as they could be. I mean they have zero content. They are specifically designed to be that way. The template the city uses says explicitly it's not a legal document, it is not designed to be a legal document, and must not be treated as a legal document. To the point where there's still talk about GNAs, they're actually not even getting signed. They're going ahead with the Safe Rest Villages and saying, no, we didn't get a GNA. Major Wheeler's great talk. I'm glad he talked about the 1,000-foot boundary, because I'll talk about the 1,000-foot boundary. The SRV's not there yet, I'll give you that story, but the River District Navigation Center has been there for 4 years. Since before they opened, we had campsites that we did not have before right there. Since that period of time, you'll hear the city and the county talk about removing campsites and cleaning up and outreach, but they'll talk about individual things. I'll give you another statistics. In 4.5 years, we have had only 4 weeks, non-consecutive, when there was not a camp within 300 feet of the Harbor of Hope. That's the important statistic, that you can drive down NATO anytime and see a series of camps right by there. When the Northwest NATO SRV site was announced, the lot was filled within a week with over 20 camps plus an RV. I'd actually say there were more, but they became hard to count individually. Stayed for about 3 weeks before a fence was put up around the lot. The county, having satisfied its requirement of protecting the lot. The tents, over half the tents moved literally just outside the tent onto the sidewalk. They were there for months. They were cleared. Several of them moved a grand total of 1,200 feet north on NATO. I tracked them with photographs. I called the developers of a new building coming up there that the tents were now directly in front of parked cars of some of their construction workers. Explained that one of the camps was owned by a gentleman that had been running a bike shop out of a tent almost directly in front of the Navigation Center. Sent him a photo where the gentleman's tent had burned to the ground and literally fire gutted a car that was next to it. And that could happen to one of his employees' car. Within 2 days, a fence was put around the parking area and the campers moved. Are you ready? Another 300 feet up, NATO. Within a week of the initial mass clearing, I saw the first tent return to close proximity of the Navigation Center where it had started. I reported it. Within 2 days, the second tent came, and progress has gone downhill since then. The mayor talked, and I highly recommend you listen. One of the problems that I have a lot is the multiple agencies, and I'm including here government and non-government agencies, because I think transition projects is also a big part of the problem. So whenever you talk with somebody, be aware you're talking to a whole group of people, and unfortunately all of them will say it's not we're not the ones that handle that. It is this other agency that handles that. That, yeah, that's not something special for your situation. That is standard. The Joint Office of Homeless Services was mentioned. It was to coordinate homeless services. They have done the exact opposite from a us as individuals viewpoint. Now you have yet another agency that people can point to and say, oh, it's not, we don't handle that, it's the Joint Office of Homeless Services. Don't have a solution to this other than repeatedly calling it out as I am here. My recommendations for you is, and they're not tried and true, I'm not a genius, I work with another group like the one that Angela has, and the 5 ladies have tried to set up. Document, document, document. Nobody believes what you say. I take this one very personally. That's like my personal thing. I photograph like crazy. It's very frustrating to have people say you're not seeing what you're seeing. And a photograph goes take a photograph of human feces in a gallery entrance. Take a photograph of a hollowed out bird car. Take a photograph of fresh blood on someone's face right after an attack, which happened about 1,000 feet from my apartment building. A single photo of a line of tents can come closer to stifling. We cleaned the area recently than any amount of words. I think it has been repeated by many people who say it better than me. Talk and talk loudly. The people you are talking to are actively not listening. As evidenced by the county. It doesn't mean they didn't hear you or they got a lot of stuff. They are actively not listening to what you're saying. I know it's a pain, but report. The mayor talked to it. I heard somebody else mention it. It's a horrible website. It's clumsy. It's not an app. You can use it on your phone. But you reporting, one person reporting, means absolutely nothing. But 2 people reporting a campsite means something, and 50 people reporting a campsite means something because it shows up on a little graph as a very dense area when they look at it. And those statistics do count for saying where the activity goes. You should be very familiar with PDX Reporter and 311, whichever one you prefer. I prefer to put photographs on there, so I use the website. One of the other things I'd say is make sure your point is not misconstrued. If you're willing to sit and talk with an agency representative, and that is later represented as they successfully change your mind by explaining, correct it and correct it loudly. And the next time you say it, lead with, the last time I spoke with this subject, I was misquoted, because they will do that. I don't have the stats on effectiveness, but I tend to write everybody. I will address out certain people, but when I send out a letter of complaint, it is always to the mayor, to the county commissioners, to the transition projects, to the Joint Office of Homeless Services. I will say, hey, I'm talking to you, but I will put them on there so that when they say, oh, it's not A, it's B, that B is on that communication. And this I'm going to stress most of all, and it's a personal thing. I'm looking at you all in the eye. You all strike me as really good people. I'm telling you that your empathy and your sympathy will be used against you. And that's a very cheap shot. The fact you are going to be made ashamed, you're going to be attempted to feel ashamed because you're saying, I don't want a drug camp next to my school. Say BS to that, please. Turn the shame around to those people. Whoever said, I'm going to be called a racist or whatever, tell them, no, you're the one that should be ashamed for enabling what is happening to this city that is happening to our school. In terms of what we should do, I really don't have all the answers, but there's a lot of people. You've heard a lot of good stuff. In terms of feeling it's not, by the way, if you guys haven't said, for the people that said, oh, it's those underprivileged areas that get impacted and get all the bad camps and stuff, may I point out that I'm talking about the Pearl and I'm talking riverfront. And let me tell you that the impact has been as much of an impact there as it would be on the poorest thing. I no longer walk around the river at night, which I used to love doing when I went there. I spoke with Joy Jones, had coffee with her. She's the director of transition projects, and she was trying to gauge what I was against and what I was for. And she said, would you be okay with having an affordable housing unit there? And I think she expected me to say no. And I actually said yes, because that's an actual solution. That is not the safe rest villages as they are designed now are not solutions, in my opinion. People can disagree. They are warehouses for people that we don't know how to do something in. When you look at some of the other programs, like Bybee Lakes, they're required to have a program to get in there. There are certain things, they're started on a path to have actual change in their lives, like Kevin was talking about, an actual change in there. The SRVs are not there. To say, you can come in, you don't need to change, you can continue doing drugs, you can continue doing what you're doing, we're going to provide you a house to do it in, we're going to provide services, you can go or not as you like, is not a solution to the problem we have now. If any of you want to see what an SRV looks like, or what, I don't have the SRV yet, obviously, but I can show you what the what the River District Navigation Center looks like after 4 years. So, anyway, thank you, and keep up the good work.
I have good news. I threw out my speech. Okay? We're just going to cut to the chase here. When the county sent that email to Angela and she forwarded it to me and they said, hey, you know, you could send your questions to us or whatever, I came this close to sending them the questions that we were going to ask them here today, and I thought, no, you need to meet with us. So I just sent a really polite reply and said, let us know what your schedule is. We'd love to talk to you, right? So I'm going to tell you some things that you can do, and first I'm going to share a brief story with you about what happened on Portland's deadliest block that you saw in the Oregonian. And that happens to be the street right behind my church. It's on Milton Street. Our church is on 82nd and Fremont. Milton is at the back of our church. And of course, you know, we had tents there, you know, here and there for, you know, a few years now. And then during the lockdowns, things became much, much worse. And of course, the city and the county wasn't doing anything about it. Initially, I would go out to the fence and I would say to the people, hey, you know, this is private property. You can't hang your stuff on the fence. Could you please take your stuff down? They'd say, yeah, we'll do that, you know, and they might do it, they might not. But as time went on, it became very, very dangerous. And there was one day that a man looked at me, and you've heard that phrase, if looks could kill. And I realized conversation is over. I'm not going to be able to talk to this person. And then within 6 months' time, 4 people were murdered on that street. And somebody going to work was grazed by one of those bullets. Then the city paid attention and cleaned out that encampment. And we were advised by the Portland Rescue Mission, you know, don't try to have any conversations with these people. It's way too dangerous. But as you were told by Al, take pictures, report, 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 report. And we just started reporting like crazy. And finally it got cleaned out. Oh no, it's cleaned out, they're just gonna come back, right? So some of us at church were talking about that. And we said, well, now what do we do? It's clean, but they're gonna come back. And so we decided we've gotta get out there on that sidewalk and do what we can to make sure that it doesn't happen again. One of the things we did is we went around and talked to neighbors. A few of us went out, Angela, Evelyn, myself, my husband, and we knocked on doors. That was kind of a scary, you know, thing to do. What's gonna happen? Are people gonna yell at me, or are they gonna slam the door in my face? And I wanna tell you what happened. Not one person yelled at me. Not one person slammed their door. Not one person refused to talk to me. Every single person that I had contact with talked to me. and express concern about what was happening in their neighborhood. And I found out that other neighbors had already been meeting together and talking about what was going on their street and the gun violence. They were already forming relationships with one another around safety in the neighborhood. And we connected with them. And they, helped us understand what was happening in this neighborhood of our church, and we helped them understand our perspective on things. We went out and started talking to drug addicts, just like Kevin has been doing for 28 years, and introduced ourselves. Hi, my name is Julie. What are you doing out here? What's going on? What happened? Why are you out here on the street? And they had conversations with us. They were blessed to have somebody talk to them. And we also told them, you don't belong here. It's not safe. You should not be living on the street. You need to go to shelter. You need to go someplace where people can help you. So here's one of the messages that I want to give you, is you have to be willing to say no in order to say yes to something else. You have to tell them that living on the street is not good for them. It's not just that it isn't good for you, it's not good for them. I asked one of the prostitutes one day, I said, do you ever see rats around here? She says, oh yeah, they're crawling around here all the time. They're living in excrement. They are living with rats. This is not humane. This is not okay. And it's okay for you to tell them that it's not okay. I know that some of you are in situations where approaching these people, just like what I mentioned happened initially with me, it just seems too dangerous. You just feel like you can't talk to them. And I can't tell you exactly what to do in that regard. I can't tell you specifically whether or not that's somebody that you can approach. But I can tell you that you are much more likely to get them off the sidewalk if you talk to them. And if you are willing to say no, if you're willing to say, you cannot camp here. You cannot be in the porch of my business. You cannot do that. That is not okay. And you have to do that. And you have to meet your neighbors. You have to find the people, your own personal network, that are going to work with you on this problem. Pay no attention to the signs in their yard or the signs that are not in their yard. Stop thinking about whether or not this person agrees with you politically or religiously. There are things that we all agree about, right? We all agree about safety, don't we? At least the people in this room do. And we all agree that the people on the street are in crisis and that they need help. So let's focus on what we agree on. The neighbors behind my church, we meet together every other week. We have dinner together. We talk about the current problems that are going on. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about religion. We talk about solutions. What are we going to do? What's this problem? What can we do about it? And we've been very actively engaged with the city on a regular basis. So, we have to get engaged with the county, right? We have to get engaged with the city. We've given you a resource card. Again, number one, please talk to your neighbors. Don't go to a drug encampment by yourself if you feel nervous about that, but take your neighbors with you, take 5 people with you, and talk to those people and say, why are you here? This is not a place for you to be. Do that. Write to the city and the county. Testify at city and county meetings. I testified for the first time a couple weeks ago at city council. And that's one of the reasons why the mayor came, right? Respond to the people on the street, don't ignore them, they're human beings. This is somebody that had a family one time, they had a house. They had brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers. These are real people with real needs. Pay attention to them, look at them, talk to them. We've got a website for you. On that resource card is a QR code. You can go to Safe Rest PDX and you can get some updates on things that are going on. Stay in touch with us. The VOA, I want you to know, the Volunteers of America across the street from this church has been very responsive. They really want to meet with the community. They do plan to set up services of some kind, rehab and that kind of thing. And they want to join with neighbors and talk about what their plans are and how we can be part of those plans. And again, can't say it enough, we have to be part of what's going on. You cannot just sit back and let this happen to you. You've got to invest yourselves in some way or another. You've got to be part of the solution. So we have an opportunity for you to be on camera and make some statements about the concerns that you have that are going on, maybe offer us up a solution. We have that survey form that you gave to you. We're happy to give that to the city and the county and say, here's what people said at our town hall. And some of the questions that didn't get answered, we still have your 3x5 cards, and we'll sift through those, and if they're not, repetitive of what we covered today, we'll certainly pass those on. Tell the county to come, okay? Let's do it.